Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that affects everyone on the road, car accident compensation. We're going to break down a really important Supreme Court ruling to make it all crystal clear.
One single moment, one accident can just completely change a life. But what happens after the initial shock? The road to getting fair compensation? Well, it can be a real legal maze, super complex and honestly pretty overwhelming.
So, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to unravel this whole process by looking at a real-life Thai Supreme Court case. This isn't just some dry legal document, it's a powerful story that shows us exactly how the courts figure out what's fair when it comes to money, loss, and the law.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the accident itself and the human loss. Then, we'll follow the court battles, break down all the different types of damages, and get into the really crucial role of compulsory insurance. After that, we'll see what the Supreme Court decided and wrap up with the key lessons for all of us. Let's get into it.
Right. Section 1, the accident and the loss. Behind every court case number, there's a human story. And this story, sadly, begins with a terrible and completely avoidable drunk driving accident.
So here's what happened. A driver, Miss G, was drunk and caused a high-speed collision. Tragically, it resulted in one person's death and left the victim's wife, Miss Yodyam, severely injured. Now, Miss G was held criminally responsible, that's one thing, but this story is about the civil case, the family's fight for financial compensation for their incredible losses. And that was a whole other battle that was just getting started.
All right, let's move on to Section 2, the court battles. And believe me, this was a long, winding road through the justice system.
This case literally worked its way up the entire legal ladder. It started in the court of first instance, which gave an initial ruling, then it went to the appeal court, which actually changed some of the compensation amounts, and finally it landed at the Supreme Court. But here's the key thing. The Supreme Court wasn't there to retry the whole case. Nope. They were focused on one single incredibly important legal question.
So that brings us to Section 3, breaking down the damages. What were the victims actually asking for? It's not just one big number. We're talking about a whole list of different kinds of losses.
Take a look at this table. It's pretty revealing. For loss of support, you can see the family claimed 1.2 million baht, and the appeal court awarded the full amount. But look at property damage. They asked for over 340,000, but the court only gave them 200,000. This really shows you how the courts don't just rubber stamp claims. They look at the evidence for each item and decide what's reasonable.
Okay, Section 4. This is where it gets really interesting. The role of compulsory insurance. Because even after figuring out those damages, the case wasn't over. The whole thing boiled down to a million baht question. Literally. How does the insurance money fit into the picture? This was the one question that took the case all the way to the top.
So, after the crash, the family received 1 million baht from 2 compulsory insurance policies. Simple enough, right? Each policy paid out the maximum for a death, which is 500,000 baht.
But here's where the law gets specific. Part of that insurance payout is earmarked as something called initial damages. Think of it like emergency money. It's meant to be paid out super fast to cover immediate costs like funeral expenses and initial medical bills. Basically, quick help when a family is in crisis.
And this is the absolute core of the legal debate. Out of that 1 million baht, 70,000 was for those initial damages. No one argued about that. The huge fight was over the remaining 930,000 baht. What was that money for? Could you just subtract it from the total bill, or did it have to be used for specific things? That was the question.
And that brings us to Section 5, the Supreme Court's final word. This is where the highest court in the land had to step in and basically say, okay, everyone, here's how you do the math correctly. They laid down the law.
The Supreme Court's ruling was brilliant in its clarity. They said, yes, that second pot of insurance money is meant to cover any damages, but, and this is the crucial part, it has an order of operations. You can't just throw it at any part of the bill you want. It first has to be used to cover funeral and medical costs. Only after that's done can you use what's left for other things.
So let's walk through their calculation. They started with that 930,000 baht from the insurance. Step 1, pay off the funeral and medical bills first. After doing that, there was a little over 514,000 baht left. Step 2, take that remainder and subtract it from one of the other big claims, in this case, the 1.2 million for loss of support.
And look at the difference that makes. The defendant didn't have to pay the full 1.2 million for that loss of support claim out of her own pocket. Because of the insurance offset, her personal bill for that specific item dropped to about 685,000 baht. It's a perfect example of how court awards and insurance are supposed to work together.
Okay, final section. Key lessons for us. Why does any of this matter to you and me? Well, this ruling isn't just some legal footnote. It has very real consequences for every single person who drives a car.
So, what does this all tell us about our rights and our responsibilities when we're out there on the road? This case is more than just numbers. It's a huge lesson for all of us.
So here's what you really need to remember. First, compensation isn't one thing. It's multifaceted, covering everything from a dented car to the devastating loss of a family member's income. Second, that compulsory insurance you pay for? It's your first line of defense, but it's not a blank check. There are very specific rules for how it gets used. And third, the courts will subtract insurance payments from what a defendant owes, but only according to that strict legal hierarchy we just talked about.
You know, when you think about it, if the law is this detailed, this specific, about calculating compensation after a tragedy, what does that say about our duty to prevent one from ever happening in the first place? This whole complicated legal process is really just a powerful and kind of sobering reminder of the incredible responsibility we all have every single time we turn the key in the ignition.